Good morning, Em.
We are on. Morning.
So we're just following up on our last chat on pregnancy and training, and we thought today, obviously, we got up to the point we talked about how to adapt your training through pregnancy, 3 trimesters, right up to the point where you're going to have the baby. So today we're going to do 2 bits. First one's going to be just like an overview of how to approach what you should be looking at doing straight after, how to approach training, because your mindset will probably have to change quite a bit. Some do's and don'ts is probably a good option in that first bit. Some big do's and don'ts, and then second bit we can talk about specifics around how to train pelvic floor, or how to train your core properly so it's all integrated, etc. And I think one thing just to say before we start is that I think you alluded to it last time, but it doesn't need to be. You could have had a baby 20 years ago, and still, if you've not fully rehabbed and or if you had dysfunctional sort of bracing strategies beforehand and you never addressed them, then obviously there might still be some work you can do that will improve like back pain or issues you've got with movement and stuff like that. So equally, men, you don't have to have had a baby. So men and ladies who don't have to have a baby, you might still have some dysfunction there due to sort of, sitting a lot or breathing mechanics and things that have never been addressed, that if they are addressed will improve like things like back pain and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just for postpartum. The stuff we're going to talk about initially, this bit will be obviously. So if you want to talk about do like overview of post baby arriving, what do we do?
Yeah, so obviously we'll talk firstly maybe a little bit about like delivery. So there's 2 sort of general types of where a baby comes into the world, either your vaginal delivery or your cesarean. Based on which one you have might just alter how you approach things in those early settings, especially in the early weeks. So if you've had a cesarean, from a medical point of view, you shouldn't do any training until 6 weeks. You really need to follow the advice of your medical provider at that point, because there's things there that you had major surgery, so that is, you do need to sort of like really respect that. So usually at your 6 to 8 week check, whenever you have that with your GP, you need to make sure you ask them for clearance to exercise before you begin any kind of structured sort of exercise program. If you had a vaginal delivery, there are sort of some rehab things that you can start doing, sort of gentle core work, but again, you do want to wait before you return to the gym for that sort of clearance from your GP. Although I would say that clearance from the GP or your midwife is very basic, and it doesn't assess any of the sort of things that might be an issue. It is literally you're kind of healed, you're okay, medically we're okay with you now. So just to make sure that, say if you've had a C-section, that you're not going to jump back into exercise, or if you've even had a vaginal delivery, that you're not going to jump back into exercise too quickly. The first thing I'd say, those first couple of weeks, really, like, you want to take the pressure off, you want to recover, you've been through something. The first 2 weeks, just be so kind to yourself. You want to spend some time lying down, taking the pressure off your pelvic floor, taking the pressure off just yourself, and really dedicate some time to just recovering for yourself. Don't feel, people get congratulated for being out for a walk 2 days after they've given birth or whatever, but you don't need to do that. And if you do go out for like short walks, which is fine, when you come back, lie down for a little bit, take a little bit of pressure off, because you've been through a lot, whether you've had tearing or whatever, and you've just had a major trauma on that pelvic floor as well, however you've delivered, because you've carried a baby for 9 months. So you do want to sort of think about taking the pressure off, and you do want to start with your pelvic floor strengthening. However you've delivered, you want to start with that pretty much straight away, just because you don't want to sort of, like, it's one of those things, use it or you lose it. You do need to start building that back up, because it's more about the function as well of your life, the quality of your life. You don't want a weak pelvic floor, because that does impact how you sort of live. So that first 6 weeks, if you've had a vaginal delivery, you can start doing some sort of gentle core work. And when I say gentle core work, I don't mean sort of slow sit-ups. I mean heel slides. I mean, like diaphragm breathing. You can do the diaphragm breathing as well if you've had a C-section. I mean, you know, sort of like some glute bridges, you know, clams, you know, side lying leg lifts. We're talking, you know, quite restorative kind of rehabilitative kind of things. And if you've had a C-section, you just start that at that 6-week point when you've been cleared by your doctor rather than earlier on. So that's just so if you've had a C-section, you just kind of push that bit of that rehab just to that point where you've been cleared. And so that is where you really want to start. You want to start with your pelvic floor strengthening. You want to start with that really basic core work. And then beyond that, once you've been cleared by your GP, it's a little bit like, oh, what next? Because they literally, like, for example, in my own experience, it was, are you feeling okay? Yeah. Are you feeling mentally okay? Yeah. All right, you're cool, you can go again. That was my personal experience. And that, I know that's typical of a lot of people. They didn't check my abs, they didn't check my pelvic floor. If I weren't in the know about a lot of these issues, I'd have just cracked on. I'd have come back to the gym then.
Yeah. And I think
that'd have been my
yeah, and that the GP doesn't know what your normal
training
exercise
is.
routine is. And
No, they don't. And it's not their job to know that either.
No.
To be fair to them, you know, they do their bit and that's what they do. So at that point, I would recommend at 6 weeks that every woman goes to see a women's health physiotherapist, because this is the person who is going to check your pelvic floor, you know, and that is often an internal examination, but it doesn't have to be if you don't want it to be. And they also assess your midline. So even if you don't have ab separation, I mean, in 100% of full-term pregnancies, it's estimated that your abs will separate at the end of pregnancy, but most women's will come back together in that first 12 weeks, but some don't. So you need to go and get that looked at. But even if you don't have separation, sometimes it can still be really weak, but the person who's best placed to assess that for you is a women's health physiotherapist. That is what they do. That is their bread and butter. That is their job. And I don't think that they get enough kind of like credit in the postpartum world in the UK for being a really important part of recovery. But I wouldn't return to any kind of different sort of exercise until you've been and got that baseline off them, because, you know, you might think, because sometimes the issues that you have aren't quite what you think. So if you've had a C-section, you need to do some C-section massage on that scar and things like that to release off, but you need to do that at the right point. So 6 weeks might be too early, but if you can get that help from the physio, you'll kind of know when you need to start doing that for yourself. And it's the same if you've had tearing, you know, vaginally, that you might need some work doing on that, or you might have issues with your pelvic floor. It might be that you're holding it and that you're actually quite tight rather than weak. And but you know, as coaches, we can't assess that. That is totally outside of our scope of practice. You know, like, we can help with strategies to help with the symptoms of those things, but we can't diagnose that. So you do need to, I really would strongly urge any person, any woman, to go and see a women's health physio. Just search Mummy MOT online and you'll find one, and go and get that new Mummy MOT before you return to any sort of formal exercise. But if you don't do that, or irrespective of that, what I would say, those first 12 weeks is a massive like change in your life. And also you do have to respect that your core is really quite weak at this point, and you're not quite where you were at. So and you'll find that you feel disconnected with your core. So I've got a little example here. When you're pregnant, your belly is a little bit like a football. It feels nice and tense, and so a lot of women, when they're training, think, oh, I've got to the end of my pregnancy, I'm going to feel amazing when I go back to training. But then you get back to training and your core feels awful, because if you think about it, it's kind of gone a little bit more like this. So you've kind of gone from this nice tense ball whilst the baby was in there to like, oh, it's just all a bit soft and squishy. And that can feel a bit weird. You can feel a bit disconnected with your core, which is why it's important that first 3 months you kind of really try to focus on sort of like core rehab and pelvic floor rehab, and really take it gently and slow. A slow recovery is a strong recovery. Yeah. If you jump back in too quickly, you know, you might not notice any issues for years down the line from not doing that, but you will if you do that. You know, where you'll be in 2-3 years time will probably be far further than you'd have been if you'd gone back straight away.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could be, you know, further on at 6 months for doing that. But if you looked a couple of years down the line, the person who is a tortoise in the hare, you want to be the tortoise in postpartum recovery, definitely. So that first 3 to 6 months, whoever you are, you really want to focus that on core rehab and pelvic floor rehab. And, you know, build up some walk-ins and static cycling, all these kind of things. Really focus on glute strength, because that gets absolutely hammered when you're pregnant. And, you know, like and so once you start hitting that 3-month mark, this is where a lot of people want to maybe start doing a little bit more. So recently some new guidance has come out on like running and things like that, returning postpartum. And that guidance is you don't run until at least 3 to 6 months. You have to bear in mind that you've been through a lot. So that first 3 months, really, really focus on rehab. And then as you start to progress on from that, you want to take it really slow. So like taking it slow, it means something different to everybody, but it is kind of like, say, if you want to start reintroducing squats, don't just grab a barbell and do a back squat at like what was 50% of your 1 rep max. We're talking like you want to start with a kneeling squat, a kneeling goblet squat, then an air squat, and then a goblet squat, and then maybe a dumbbell front squat, and then maybe squatting with the weights down to the side, and then starting to think about maybe putting a barbell back in, and it's really taking that, and whatever progression you do, whatever movement it is that you want to do, it's about slowly progressing it. So say if it's running, you don't want to be returning to running unless, say, you can do a few just jumps in place. Can you bounce on one leg? Can you balance on one leg? Can you do a squat on one leg? Have you actually rebuilt this like one-legged strength that you're going to need to run? Can you jump for a minute without leaking and wetting yourself? Can you do these things? And spend some time building those foundations in first, whatever the movement pattern is, and then it's about, like, say if you're going overhead, that's really hard postpartum because you have this tendency to want to sort of flare your ribs out. Can you get overhead and keep your ribs stacked down? If you can't, how are you going to start that? Maybe you're going to start seated. Are you going to do single arm? I really recommend single arm work, a lot of unilateral work postpartum, because things get a little bit out of whack depending on sort of like how you carry your baby. And also once babies arrive, we all tend to carry them more on one side, just because we do. I don't quite know why that is, but I struggle to carry my ones on my right hand side, but I always carry them on my left. And so, a lot of unilateral work, it'll help show you where those imbalances are for you. So, a lot of single leg kind of deadlift work, or, single arm work, single arm thrusters, whatever it is, and throw yourself off balance a little bit whilst really still progressively doing very slow and gentle ab work. So whether you can still do press ups or pull ups or whatever postpartum doesn't mean that you should. So again, with a press up, I'd start really elevated against the wall, because the more elevated you are, the more protective it is of your core whilst you're rehabbing that. So you want to slowly bring yourself back down and watch for any sort of symptoms that you might feel. Can you lift your pelvic floor whilst you're moving? And it's always, like I said, about when you're pregnant and when you're postpartum, about that breath. So you want never to be holding your breath, at least in that first year postpartum. It's about breathing out on exertion. So when you stand up, you squat, exhale. When you do a deadlift, exhale as you lift that plate off the floor, that barbell off the floor or whatever. Exhale as you press overhead. Exhale as you push away in a press up. You've got to really start building that breath work, because that is how it allows your pelvic floor to move. So if I show you my little balloon, like your pelvic floor and your diaphragm, they like move together. So when you sort of inhale, the diaphragm comes down, the pelvic floor relaxes, and then as you exhale, it all comes up together. So the diaphragm comes up and the pelvic floor comes up. So you want to be supporting your pelvic floor in everything that you do, and that also helps your core function. We'll come back to that balloon later. And the thing with a lot of postpartum complaints like diastasis recti or prolapse is, for some women, they're not an issue until they are. So you might think, I'm fine, I haven't got this, I haven't got symptoms of prolapse, I haven't got symptoms of this, that, and the other. And then you push yourself too quickly back into something, and suddenly you're like, I do have an issue now. And you can create an issue where there might not have been one if you'd taken a little bit more time. And it really is about really gradually just building that back in, because your body has changed. And so, like, I find this really hard, but trying not to compare yourself to where you were before you had your baby. You're a different person almost. You've got another person who's now dependent on you, and your priorities have shifted as well, and that's okay. Obviously, if you're a full-time athlete and that's your job, that's a little bit different. But for most of us, you've got to find that balance between the two. It can be hard enough getting time to have a shower, never mind spend 2 hours in the gym doing X, Y, and Z. So and I would recommend going to re-see your pelvic floor physiotherapist at different points. So like, I went back to see mine at like 3 months thinking I was ready to do X, Y, and Z. And some of the things I thought I was ready to do, I was ready to do. And she was like, yeah, you're ready for that. And then there's other things that I was quite ready to like crack on with. And she was like, you can't do this yet. Like your core can't manage that yet. But it's hard to see that in yourself. And especially like for me, like my stomach's really stretched and I've got a lot of extra skin. So it's hard to see sometimes what's going on there. Like I can't always see doming and coning. So, and if you're using both your arms to say hang off a bar, how the hell do I know? So when I went to see them, it was like, oh no, you can't, you're not managing this very well. And, you know, it's good to have that extra person to help you.
Yeah.
Especially someone who's really like a bit removed from your training, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, and then there are sort of issues to look out for, you know, postpartum, like prolapse. So that's kind of like where one of your pelvic organs might sort of like they come down a little bit. So the most common symptom people feel with that is like a heaviness or a dragging, sort of like down below. And you can have that however you've delivered. There's all these myths that, oh, if you've had a C-section, you won't have pelvic floor issues, or if you've had a vaginal delivery, you won't have issues with your core. But that's not true. You know, it doesn't matter how you've delivered, you can have these problems, but some people don't. And, you know, so there are things to look out for. So with diastasis recti, you might notice that your abdomen looks different, or, you know, that it feels squishier, or that you see like a massive like doming in between things, and you can feel that yourself and assess that yourself at home. But again, even if you assess that yourself, some people think the wider the gap the worse it is, but it's actually the deeper the gap the worse it is. So you can have someone who's got a 2-finger gap, but if it's really deep, that suggests that they're not creating much tension in like the connective tissue, the linea alba between their 6-pack muscles. And that's worse than someone who say has a 3 or 4-finger gap, but you can hardly get into that because that means they're generating good tension across that.
Right.
If you do find that you have something like diastasis recti as well, there's this huge like marketing ploy to close it, you know, and this and you don't, and for some women that's not the case. You'll never close it. It's actually about being functional, and it should always be about being functional. So your postpartum return, you do want to think about, am I functional? So can I do this without wetting myself? Can I do this without, you know, any problems with my abs? Can I do this without, you know, back pain? And that's function, not, oh, I've hit my old PR. That's not function, you know. And that really probably more needs to be sort of your focus. You know, it irritates me, you know, like Tenor Lady and Always Discreet. There's this whole industry firing at us that it's normal to have, you know, like incontinence and pelvic floor issues. But actually there's quite a lot we can do. It's common, but it's not normal. You know, it's your body giving you feedback that it's not happy about something.
It's the same with like Gaviscon and stuff in it, like, you know. Like you've got issues with your digestion. Just take these and then keep eating all the stuff you're eating before that's causing it or whatever.
So the adverts really annoy me when you've got women like running up the stairs like, oh, I'm okay, I've got my Tenor Lady Discreet on, and I'm like, well, how about you rebuild and learn to use your pelvic floor in a way that is like that doesn't happen? Why do we, you know, sometimes, you know, you can do, there's only so much you can do with like conservative management of these things, but there is a lot you can do through conservative management, and there are a lot of things you can do, like strategies to improve things that I think a lot of women don't realize they can do, and we accept an awful lot of bad side effects from having children as just the norm. And they don't need to be. And, you know, I feel quite passionately about that, you know, you do not need to be suffering with incontinence or pressure down below or, you know, back pain. There are things you can do, and it might mean that you have to reframe where you're at or what you're thinking, but it won't be for necessarily forever. You know, it just might be that you need to spend a bit of time.
It will take work.
And it does take work, and it's boring work. I'm not going to pretend that the ab work that you do for rehab isn't exciting. It is exciting, because it's really not. It does suck. It's boring, but it's really important. And it's not interesting either, because when you do like deep ab rehab kind of work, it doesn't give you DOMs. It's not like doing Annie, you know, where you know you've done something with your abs. It's kind of like, is this doing anything? You know, it is, because I like a lot of women, me especially, I know that I'm in this camp. I'm a tendency to over engage. I'm terrible at relaxing my core. That is like one of my biggest issues, but you know, is learning to relax. And a lot of people think, right, I need to be tense, I need to tighten this, I'm going to pull my pelvic floor up tight to do everything, I'm going to pull my core in tight, and that's going to really protect me. But actually that's often worse. especially postpartum, you need to learn to do both ends of it, the contraction and the relaxation of things, which is why the breath's so important. Because when you breathe out, you should, that's when you're contracting. When you breathe in, you want to be relaxing. It's kind of like when you're moving. So the breath's really important. And so if you're looking at it in terms of a timeline, it might take you up to a year to even get back to sort of like a baseline level of where you're at. But I really, if I could make every woman do one thing, it would be to go and see a women's health physio, because like you will learn so much about yourself in that bit, in that session with them, that actually will help your entire life. And we're talking about menopause as well, because if you've not dealt with this, when you have that life event and your hormones change, these things could suddenly become an issue that you didn't realize you had an issue with, whereas you could be addressing them now. And just and they're small changes, changing the way you breathe when you exercise. It's really hard to do, but it's not like mind-blowingly awful. It is something you can do, or changing your posture slightly, or maybe spending a little bit more time focusing on different ab work. These are little things you can do, and they're not easy. They're simple, but they're not easy to do. But if you do that, you might find that you're not going to have any pelvic floor dysfunction throughout your life, and surely that's better than just carrying on with other techniques. And so I do think it's definitely postpartum. Slow is strong. You want to move with intention first. It's like Brianna Battles. I love Brianna Battles. She says intention first, intensity later. And I think that is so true. Don't be rushing back to like hit, Fran or blah, 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 whatever it is. Do everything you do with intention first. Don't be afraid to scale. Don't be afraid to still be scaling a year on. And just really, really gradually build, and not even just scaling, like modifying movements to something different. I still often do elevated press ups and stuff, because I just cannot manage my core pressure when I get tired. Because it goes out the window.
You can obviously there needs to, if you're very kind of if you do train hard before, and there does need to be a big change in mindset, doesn't there?
Yeah, there does.
And I think
it's hard.
And I think the overarching sort of message I'm getting is just, and this applies to everyone really, is just slow down. Like why are we trying to do, obviously certain workouts, if you're at the gym and it says as many reps as possible, then that there's a kind of, there's an assumption that you need to go as fast as you possibly can, which in some cases you do, if it's safe to do so. But at the same time, if you're in this situation, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but like the core stuff, the core and the breath stuff takes a huge amount of body awareness.
Yeah, it does.
And the one thing you won't have while you're going 100 miles an hour and trying to do reps as quick as you can is any kind of body awareness, or any kind of any sort of deep understanding of what's going on. So I think the overarching message is, and again, if we're looking at getting stronger and getting fitter, like tempo work and isometric holds, and like you're talking about, really controlled negatives, you'll get probably, you get stronger doing those than you will just bashing reps out. You'll get a lot more body control, and you'll have a lot more body awareness, because you'll be able to feel what's happening over the course of a 3-second, negative press up, versus trying to do them as fast as you possibly can.
And it's about getting like interested in your own body and how it works. Like, like the human body is fascinating. The way the female body recovers as well from pregnancy is amazing. Like what we do, how we've evolved is incredible. But you need to spend a bit of time actually not just like coming in and hammering yourself. Like get interested in why am I experiencing this? Don't see it as a negative thing if something's going wrong. It's like, okay, well, what can I do here? What's going on? Why is this happening for me? Why am I feeling this way? Right. Let's look at this objectively, not, oh, it's 2 minutes before the workout finishes, I'm just gonna flip and hammer it. You could be like, right, why did this happen? Get curious about your own body, get curious about why it is doing what it's doing, why it's giving you that feedback, because it'll be doing it for a reason. The body's more clever than we are, really. Get interested. I think I've learned an awful lot about myself and my body and how it moves, and then I see that in other people as well. And and it is fascinating. Maybe it holds me back a little bit sometimes because I'm too busy thinking about what I'm doing rather than doing it. But
But that's
you know,
that's a better option, surely.
I think so. Yeah.
You know, and again, it's a talk for another rabbit hole, but it comes back to, you've already mentioned it. It's like, what is your intent? Like, why are you in the gym? Like, why are we
Yeah.
training? And what is your goal? And if it's just to try and burn calories because of whatever else,
Yeah.
then that's probably not the right mindset to be like, having some compassion
No.
for yourself and trying to rebuild a strong body. It's not going to happen if all you're worried about is how many calories you're burning, or
And
or
you want to be an efficient
how
body.
fast you're doing a workout versus somebody stood next to you.
But if you move efficiently, you're probably more likely to burn more calories if
Yeah,
you're recruiting the muscles correctly. Even just in your daily life, you're more likely to be just a more functioning, efficient sort of
yeah,
person, And I think postpartum is a great opportunity to address these issues and to take a little bit of time to look at yourself and take stock of where you're at and slowly build those foundations. Don't build your castles in the sky, all that sort of thing. You've got
yeah,
to, and don't worry about what other people are thinking either of you. I think that is such a huge thing that, like I think we said this in the last one, nobody congratulates you for doing the slow return. But I think that the fitness industry needs to change its mindset on that. I think there totally needs to be that shift to being like, wow, that person took a bit of time doing that. I wish I had that patience. That's how I aspire to be. Not,
yeah,
oh, do you see that person absolutely smash themselves? Um, they might have back pain, X, Y, and Z, or like laugh off other issues that they're having. Oh yeah, well, I'm a mum, this is what happens, rather than being like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take it back here
yeah.
and I'm gonna work out why this is happening and spend a bit of time
I think that's
on this.
one of the things I find really frustrating. I don't understand, because I personally, I'm far more impressed with gymnasts who've got like the most incredible like body control and strength, and like I'm
Yeah.
far more impressed watching an Olympic gymnast than I am watching a CrossFit athlete just doing fitness. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yep.
know they're incredibly strong and everything else, and but I'm far more impressed with a gymnast who can,
Yeah.
he's got full control of their body in every single way you can imagine, than somebody who's just like, who can just suffer their way through a workout better than somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I
And
do
that,
totally know what you mean.
when we're in the gym and we're coaching, or we're trying to get the point across to control your bodies, and to really, take the time to try and build that control and everything else. That's quite frustrating when obviously there's influences from outside, like your sort
Yeah.
of CrossFit athletes who are kind of giving, and not on them necessarily, but the fitness industry gives a very different kind
Yeah.
of goal versus what we should be aiming for, which is being able to control our meat and bones and move well.
Yeah. And understand our meat and bones as well, and
Yeah,
why we're all different, you know. And sometimes I think you just got to be a bit humble about what your own limitations are and why they're there.
yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah,
And I think,
100%.
it's yeah, I do think it's well, the human body's amazing,
Yeah,
but also the human mind's a bit daft.
yeah. The human body's amazing, but obviously it's been kind of, again, the fitness industry is kind of reduced it down to just, you it's a car engine. We've got to try and
Yeah,
burn calories. If
calories in, calories out.
yeah, you can only be strong if you can do these movements that that we've invented. Um, you know, it's just one
Strength
of,
is such a subjective thing. Why is
yeah,
deadlifting a barbell? Why is that considered? Oh, I love deadlifting a barbell, but
yeah,
but why is that considered strength versus say being able to do a front lever, or well, that is I suppose
yeah.
considered strength, but nobody really works towards
Uh-huh.
those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think again, coming back to the mindset and the kind of what is your goal, is how strong do you need to be?
Yeah,
If you can lift your own, like, if you can lift twice your body weight off the floor without without warming up, then do you need to be any stronger than that, really? You know,
probably not.
if you can squat your own body weight, do you need to be much strong, like, if for real life and to be
Yeah,
functional? So that's again that's a discussion for another
another
day.
rabbit hole in it for another day,
There's nothing
probably.
wrong with being strong, but obviously there's a tipping point between there's getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and then there's a tipping point where you see, obviously, certain
Deterioration.
sports like powerlifting and stuff where that's that pursuit of just strength is to the
Yeah.
detriment of your joints and everything else.
I think I've been there really, like, especially like, I mean, I've taken my deadlift to some heavy places, but if I think back to it now, like, I definitely didn't use good bracing strategies.
Likewise, I'm the same.
And and I think, oh, I don't know whether it really like was serving me very well. I mean, I'm proud of where my deadlift got to, but also it was, equally, I don't think I'm going to be going back there somehow, because I
And
don't need
that's
to.
fine. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever picked up that amount of weight in my daily life.
No.
I've never needed to.
Exactly. And if you do need to lift a car off a child, then
I think you'll find the Mong strength somewhere, won't you?
there, innit?
Yeah.
Adrenaline will get you through.
Adrenaline, yes.
So yeah, that's a good overview. Then that's a good. I think that, like I say, the takeaways really are just maybe, well, definitely changing your mindset.
Change your mindset.
And
Take it slow.
That's for everyone. Like we've gone on about it a lot now in the gym and in these chats, but the big thing we're kind of trying to get across in the gym now is do it for the right reasons. And obviously,
Yep.
if you've just had a baby, then you've got you have really got to just, like you say, take time and just
good 3 to 6 months on that rehab.
Focus on eating well, getting good sleep. Obviously, you're not going to get good sleep.
No.
It's broken. So when you can, you need to take that sleep.
Drink plenty.
Give yourself time to recover. So if you are starting to get back into training, but you're still getting disrupted sleep, then you've got to factor that in.
Yeah, you do.
Just take care of yourself. Obviously, that's the key thing, isn't it?
And you've got like a whole lifetime when they're bigger to really hammer it. The time you take to bond and the time you take to rehab yourself will pay off massively in the future, definitely. But women's health physio is really important. Think about your pelvic floor. Wetting yourself is not normal.
Yeah,
it is common. And take it slow, take it steady, and take it maybe a little bit slower than you think you should.
Yeah,
is definitely what I would advise.
I was going to suggest we talk about specifics of training the core, if you like, but I think realistically, to do it properly, it's not something that you can coach in a group setting, because, like we say, everyone should probably do a bit of it, but it's not something it requires a lot of body awareness. It requires a lot of somebody it's very helpful to have eyes on somebody.
Yeah, it is.
Explaining to you what to do and what you should be feeling and talking you through it all. So I'd say that a good protocol is yourself, to come and...
I'll give a few tips that I would give for everybody, postpartum especially, but every person.
Okay.
So first one, I'm going to bring my little balloon back out.
Nice.
So one thing that we are chronically bad at as a society, especially women, is sucking our bellies in. Now, sucking your stomach in is terrible. So the mum pooch that people have, that like distending of your lower abdomen, things like that, often comes from sucking your stomach in. So when you suck your stomach in, so here's your diaphragm and your pelvic floor, when you squeeze that in, you are sending pressure in all sorts of weird places. You are sending like pressure down here, down on your pelvic floor, and you are sending the bottom of your abs out as well. So if you constantly suck your stomach in, and most people think they don't, but they do. It's not normal to have flat abs by the end of the day when you've got a belly full of food, gas, whatnot. Most people don't have a flat stomach at the end of the day. Most people constantly are holding their stomach in. If I could give everybody something to do, it is stop holding your stomach in. Stop wearing things that train your waist to be sucked in. Stop wearing tight trousers. Postpartum, don't wear tight trousers, but in general, don't wear tight trousers. You do not. The fact that there is an industry that sells you waist sucking in trousers tells you that most people do not have flat abs. Yeah. Because if they did, there would be no market for it. So, so holding it in, because when you are squeezing that belly in, whether it be tight jeans, whether it be that you're sucking it in, you are putting pressure on that pelvic floor. You are sending abdominal pressure out in all sorts of weird things. You're also then affecting how you breathe. So you're probably going to find that you start chest breathing as well, rather than diaphragm breathing.
Yeah.
So like one easy thing that people can do for their cores without like having any eyes on them is stop holding your stomach in, stop wearing really tight trousers. Not good for you. That would be my first, like the biggest thing. If anyone could do anything, especially now you're all at home, what does it matter if you let your stomach hang out? Who's going to see? Like let it hang out and be really honest with yourself. Like relax it and then think about it. Take a deep breath. Is it really relaxed? Probably not. Relax it again. Let it go. That would be that is one thing that most people need to do with their cores that they won't, and it does lead to dysfunction, holding your stomach in. And you're probably like sucking it in with like your 6-pack abs rather than like your deep abdominals as well. So that again is just creating more and more issues, and it's just not what we want. So that would be my first take home point for core 101, how to not have a dysfunctional core. Stop sucking it in all the time.
Yeah.
Definitely in your day-to-day life. It's not good.
Fair one. So yeah. And then the actual training side of it, I personally would recommend coming to see you.
Yeah.
We've got Jay Faulkner. I think you've done a lot of work with her, and she's absolutely like you killing it. I've seen her training recently, and she's like moving really well, and just a really good advert for you.
I do make her do an awful lot of boring core work. Like she does core
Yeah.
work every session we do together, and it's not interesting. It's not particularly like she doesn't have core DOMs the next day. It is very much about breath work, and everything that you do is about breathing as well. Like it's not like it's too heavy if you can't do it whilst you breathe it, if you can't exhale when you lift it.
Yeah.
But
it's working. Like you can see
yeah.
that, it's worked for her, and she's back doing pretty much everything she was doing, I would say.
Yeah.
And more.
She's doing well.
Moving really
She's a
well.
beast.
So yeah, come to see you is probably the best way to get a really good, even if it's just an initial talking people through the initial the main exercises and what they should be feeling, and how to sort of how to learn about how to brace properly and how to breathe properly, all that kind of stuff.
Your body's quite good at bracing. Your body is quite good at knowing how much tension it needs to generate without you overthinking it.
Yeah.
Like I've been guilty of that, like over bracing, like picking up, I don't know, something really light. Yeah, like right. I never thought about where I was sending that pressure. I just was like, I've got to be tight. Everything's tight, like I can go. It's not good.
Again, like you say, unless you're doing a maximal lift, your spine, your body will prioritize your spine. So you're not going to not the muscles that stabilize your spine and your core are not going to work if you're picking weight up off the floor. They're naturally going to do what they need to do without you sort of overly kind of taking big breaths in and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
But like you say, you just need to have a good understanding of how to make everything work together.
Good test for everyone to do at home is if you've got a balloon, lie down on your back and just like put your feet up on something and blow that balloon up. If you are good at managing your core pressure, your core will come in and up. If you're bad at it, your belly will blow out. If your belly blows out when you blow up a balloon, that's a sign that you are perhaps not managing your intra-abdominal pressure very well. And that is a really simple test that everybody can do themselves at home. So film yourself doing it and just see, put your hand on your stomach as you're doing it and see where that balloon goes, what happens to your stomach as you blow that balloon up. If you can't blow that balloon up when your abs come in and slightly up, then you're not managing pressure well.
Cool.
And that should be quite natural, but for most of us, we'll push our bellies out.
Yeah.
So that is a really easy, simple test you can do yourself to see how you manage your core pressure.
Cool. Well, in that case, I think, is there anything else you want to go into? Or
No, I think the thing is, I think with a lot of things like postpartum, a lot of it's quite individual. So,
Very
you know,
individual.
like person to person, pregnancy to pregnancy, um, it will be different. You know, like my recovery from my first pregnancy to my second one has been worlds apart, you
Yeah,
know, and I'm the same human, you know, but
yeah,
it's just been different.
yeah,
And so I think that there is an awful lot of like individuality to it. There's a lot of nuance to it. And so, you know, I could be here for a year if I went through every tiny little,
yeah, yeah, totally.
you know, rabbit hole that you could go down. But
Yeah,
I do think that it's just, you know, I think we've got the key points, the
yeah,
generic bits, you
yeah. I
know.
think it's a good overview of what to expect and
Yeah.
how to sort of treat your recovery
And as always, be
postpartum.
kind to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That goes for everyone.
I need to follow my own advice though.
Yeah, well, don't we all? But
Yeah.
the starting point is being aware that if you're aware that you're not very good at, like,
Yeah.
we're both like you and me are both very kind of want to just plow on through no matter what.
Yeah.
Um, if you're aware of that, that's a start.
It is
Um,
self-awareness.
yeah. So yeah, cool. So that's everything I think that we need to
Yeah.
discuss. And then I'll recommend coming to see you if people want to get a better understanding of how it all works and what to
Yeah.
be looking for and doing. And obviously get in touch if they've got any further questions. Then I'm sure
Yeah.
you're happy to answer them. So yeah,
Definitely.
cool.
Send
Right,
me a
we'll leave it at
message.
that then.
Yeah. Sounds good to
Cheers then.
me.
Right,
Right.
I'll sign us off
Right.
at that then.